we have, we're about to just push into today. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. We really appreciate it. This is an opportunity for us to reflect on 2020. And many of us started working on blended environments as a temporary solution. And we were thinking, okay, if we can just make it through a month or two, let's just see how this goes. And we're at the point now where it will be interesting to see what becomes our new normal. So we have a number of experts that are here to talk about just moving forward with on-site and remote workplaces. And what I want to make sure that each of you know is that, yes, we have people on our panel, but you bring a wealth of information too. So we're looking for everyone to be able to participate, ask questions, etc. So as you have questions, please just put them in the chat. I'll be watching for those. And we're going to start out by just getting some introductions from our panel. I'll start out. My name is Christy Stepp. I'm with Sigrid Solutions. Mike Durgis is my business partner, and we do executive search, management search, and leadership advisory. We're so happy to be here today. And let's start with Cheryl. Cheryl, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Christy and Mike, for inviting me to be on the panel. I'm excited to be here. I am a leadership and organizational coach. I work with executives, professionals, and organizations to do things like fine tune their leadership or improve organizational effectiveness. And I am also a member of Forbes Coaches Council, where I write articles on employee engagement or organizational culture or career development.
That's great. Thank you, Cheryl. And Sandy.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sandy Harvey, President and CEO of Exodus Consulting Group, and we focus on leadership development and coaching and also diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So I love working with organizations around building strong leaders and then also really focusing on not just check the box training for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but really looking at a strategy to implement to build really robust, inclusive organizations.
Thank you, Sandy. And Jay.
Thank you, Christy and Mike, for inviting me to be on the panel. My name is Jay Harwaluk. I am the founder and CEO of the Acumax Index. We're the only assessment that measures and reports on human wiring, different than behavior or personality, and gives a deep dive into somebody. And it helps explain why some people are really happy in a blended environment, some aren't. And I hope to get some tips to all of you today that you can pass on to others.
Okay, and Mike.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Glad you all could join us. As Christy said, Mike Durgis, also with Sigrid Solutions. We do, from a management recruiting and advisory point of view, focus on connecting great employers with amazing talent. It was interesting as we were coming in this morning, just in the Wall Street Journal was an article that talks about how returning to the office has plateaued over the fall at about 25%. So there's still 75% of the office workforce that's still working from home. So I think this is a really kind of still timely conversation to be having on how best to lead those teams that some may be in the office and some may still be working from home. So looking forward to having a great conversation with everybody.
Absolutely. So I want to start with Cheryl. And, as we think about where we are right now in December in 2020 and looking out over the next year, I'd love to hear your reflection and really what you're hearing right now around the biggest challenges that you see leaders and organizations struggling with.
Yeah. So I think the thing that's the most top of mind right now for the leaders that I'm working with and coaching is this idea of finding balance between being an empathetic leader, knowing that many employees are genuinely struggling right now, but still being able to meet business challenges and financial objectives. I think it's a really difficult line to walk in the moment. And there's not necessarily any easy answers to that. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I'm seeing as I work with leaders.
And Jay, you know what? I want you to build a bit on that because one of the things that Jay, we're seeing, but Jay has also found is that productivity is up in organizations, but other things like collaboration, ideation, and innovation are way down. So why do you think that is? What's going on?
Well, what's happening, especially in the remote workforce, is it's very siloed in a way. I have my work to do, and I take care of it, and I am more productive because the reality of it is, I can roll out of bed, grab a cup of coffee, and start to work, as opposed to having to get ready, drive into the office. So, and with more restricted activities, people are more in, just sit down and I'll take care of some things. I've got a more flexible work schedule. So from a productivity perspective, people are getting their jobs done. What's missing though are what I like to call the coffee pot meeting. Christy and Jay go to get a cup of coffee and all of a sudden we strike up a little conversation. I say, hey, I'm struggling with this issue. Can you help me with it? And oftentimes the ideation and innovation come from those spontaneous meetings. Everything is just so very, very structured because of all the Zoom calls. And so you're missing that spontaneity, which is really having an impact. One of our clients did a great thing. I'm very impressed with what she did. She schedules random days in the week where she'll say, hey, look, I'm going to be on Zoom for 2 hours. Just join me. We can chit chat, we can talk. I mean, it doesn't have to be about business. And so she's finding that's a great way to re-engage employees because sometimes in those personal conversations, something will come up that will spark an idea. And that's one of the new shifts that we have to make. And so that kind of really sums up that we need to work harder with collaboration, ideation in a Zoom driven environment.
Thank you, Jay. Now I'm going to turn to Sandy, and I think we can build a bit on that because many of us are hearing that employees are a bit stressed. Maybe they felt like they had a great leader before, and maybe they didn't. But especially now, there may be some feelings that perhaps employees aren't getting what they need from their employers. So, Sandy, can you tell us a little bit about what you're hearing and experiencing?
Sure. It is, it's interesting because poor leaders that were poor leaders in the office, it's magnified like times 10. So it's really difficult for team members to really understand how to navigate because they had a micromanager in the office and now they have a really, 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 really high intensity micromanager on Zoom. And team members really don't feel as engaged. Um, I love what Jay and Cheryl both mentioned around, productivity is there. However, some of the engagement pieces are not. Some of good morning, how are you? So how do you have that water cooler conversation when you're not in the office? And some leaders are finding, I don't have time for that. I've actually had leaders tell me, I don't have time to be engaged right now. And I don't know how you don't have time to be engaged because you lose your team and you lose the productivity that's really there. So some of that is really for leaders to take a step back, focus on emotional intelligence. If you're not self-aware, all of this will mean nothing at the end of this. You can't just say, oh, I can't wait till we go back to the office because things will not be the same when we go back. So I think it's really important for leaders to understand that they have to have and enact the competencies that are there that they were hired for, but also make sure that they are engaging with their teams in order to keep them intact, whether they're in the office or remote.
And Mike, I want to turn to you because we did the engagement survey and we learned quite a bit. Can you add some insight into what people are doing to try to maintain engagement and what specifically people are experiencing with regards to leaders? Do you want to build on that?
Yeah. So, from the global study that we did, we looked at some of the major motivators for employees and cutting across kind of all demographics. there were three key drivers of motivation, which were feeling valued in the company, having an impact, and work-life balance. And I think all of those are impacted by this, work from home, work in the office. Interesting, I was on a call with somebody yesterday, and she's with a major multinational, just had a new position. So she's just in the last 3-4 months moved into a new position, and this shocked me, has not seen an image of her new boss. So she's worked with the guy now for 3-4 months, and he doesn't like cameras, I guess. And so all of her interactions have been, phone or Zoom without video. So she could be standing next to the guy in Starbucks and not know who he was. That just, shocked me. But, you talk about, okay, now is this employee feeling valued because her boss doesn't obviously feel engaged enough to have an interaction with her? How is she feeling about having an impact? It hits kind of all of those points. And so, as we talk about leadership, understanding that, to Sandy's, emotional intelligence, aspects of it, you've got to be there for the employees.
Yeah, it's interesting as we look at engagement and how important it is in an organization, and knowing that when employees are engaged, they're giving that discretionary effort, they're going above and beyond. And we all know what that feels like when you're like, well, I could go home, but I think I better stay here because I just want to have this done before I come in tomorrow. I just want to get this off because I promised Jay and Sandy, and we really did what we said we're going to do. This is going to be amazing. With regards to retaining people, with regards to having the culture that you desire, we should talk a bit about strategies that people are using that they thought perhaps were temporary that might be valuable to share with other companies to move forward. So let me start with Cheryl. What are you hearing that is working, that is considering this time now, getting employees engaged and keeping them there?
Yeah, before I answer that directly, I want to, something that Jay and Sandy said reminded me of some research. I love research. I think every time I say research and data, Christy kind of rolls her eyes at me. No, I know you don't. But there was some really interesting research in the 70s about the Allen curve. I don't know if you're familiar with the Allen curve, but it was a communication theory developed by a professor at MIT. And basically he studied engineers and said, is there a correlation between the proximity of how close they sit together and ideation and engagement? And there was. And he found that even if they're in the same office, but sit a distance away from each other, this makes sense, right? Their collaboration reduced. And someone recently in 2020, in the beginning, I think Q1 or something like that, picked up that study and said, what about technology? So now that we have technology that we didn't have in the 70s, is that mitigating that? And what they found was chat is not, email is not. The Allen curve still holds with those technologies, but video, it doesn't hold. So if you get, even though everyone's like, oh, my mom's zoomed out, or the person that Mike mentioned who didn't want to show his camera, video mitigates the Allen curve. So it does create ideation, collaboration, and engagement. So back to your question, Christy, I think organizations that are holding that weekly town hall, I'm looking at you, Rich Pennock, who is on this call because I know he does that. And even though we're kind of like another Zoom, those things actually do work. Or the person that Jay mentioned who does those open office hours. So I think those are great things to be doing right now.
What about you, Jay? What are you hearing?
My organization has been completely remote since day one. So, my whole team, we work remotely. So this has been nothing new. The biggest challenge has been lack of physical interaction with the clients. What I have found to be very, very successful is we have structured meetings every Monday morning and an update. But what I also find has been very successful, is I have everybody's calendar. So I will do spontaneous calls once or twice a week. And a lot of times it might just be a personal conversation. Hey, what's going on? How'd you, you took a couple days off, what'd you guys go do? Just to create more of that human element. So it's not always, well, agenda item 1 on Zoom today, agenda item 2. So I had that interaction. I've been doing that for 8 years, and it keeps people engaged. Is there anything you want to talk about? Is there anything that's on your mind? And so we have our structured meeting, and then I have 2 unstructured calls with every team member every week. And sometimes they may go 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Sometimes they may just go 5 minutes, but it's just that constant communication. And I think some elements of spontaneity that people really enjoy. It's been very successful over the years. And we've been trying to get our clients that are new to the remote working environment onto that same kind of a program. And so it's just important. It's the connectivity, the conversation, and I think making a little bit of the mindset shift that it doesn't always have to be about business. It can just be a personal conversation with the individual where other things may pop up. And I find that to have been very successful. But it's a mindset shift. It's hard for clients who have been completely in an office environment and now shifted to a very small office environment with a very large remote workforce, which seems to be more the norm. And making that, if you're not used to it, it's like anything else, it takes 30 to 90 days to, create a permanent habit. So it's getting people to do that. And what we recommend is get on Outlook, just make yourself a reminder, on Tuesday, spontaneous calls to Chris, to Melanie, to Cody. And you can mix it up and just look at their calendars and do that. I find that to be very, very successful. And more clients are adapting that, and they're finding that it just engages people better.
Thank you, Jay. Sandy, one of the things I think is interesting is I think sometimes leaders think they're doing a better job of engaging their employees than the employees might say. And that's something that Mike and I saw in the engagement survey. So I'd love to hear how you're dealing with that, especially from a coaching perspective, or seeing, being on the outside, kind of hearing from both sides. What are your thoughts about that difference?
Yes, it's very interesting because as I'm hearing from leaders from across the country, technology is a challenge for some leaders. And maybe it wasn't a huge impact when they were in the office, but now that they're remote and you don't have IT that can come over to your desk, it is a challenge because you don't know how to operate Zoom, or you don't know how to set up GoToMeetings and use Teams and use the collaborative tools that are out there. So it's first overcoming the hurdle of I don't know, but then also being honest about that and transparent, and really being able to engage with the team on that of, you know what, I'm not the best at this, and maybe somebody on your team is. So it's an opportunity to really build the team and really build it around transparency and honesty and setting the expectations. But I really think that some of the leaders are experiencing so much overload with technology that they're just frustrated and they're short. And I'm working with an organization now, and one of the team members said during a listening session, they said, if my leader would just put good morning at the top of the email, it would be much better received, instead of saying, when will you have this done? Or will you still have this done by noon? How was your weekend? Some of the basic things that we did well, we're not doing as well right now working remotely.
I appreciate that. And it's so interesting because I know communication is key. And we keep hearing about techniques for solid communication and authenticity, really. I want to turn it to Mike for a second, because I think while communication is really important, I'd love to hear what else he's hearing about with regards to challenges and opportunities in a blended workplace that may continue on forever.
And yes, and I need to unmute. And actually, I'll just going back to Sandy's for just a second with a personal, not necessarily glowing anecdote, but, and I mentioned this as we were kind of going into our planning thing, I'm very kind of task oriented. So, I want to go and get things done. And so my first draft of every email just gets right to the point. it misses that good morning piece of it. But I know myself well enough now that I write the email, then I go back and I add, something, more personal and, oh, good morning and how was the weekend and all of that. So it's knowing myself well enough to know that if I want to create that interaction, I need to be conscious about it. Otherwise, I'll just go straight to the issue. Christy, to your question, I think what we're seeing is a challenge in one, building mutual trust. So trust, from the manager to the employee and vice versa, as well as a sense of fairness, because you've got now two separate workforces and you're managing or trying to lead two separate workforces, the one that's sitting at home and the one that's sitting in the office. On the trust side, I mean, there's a number of different things, that I think need to be done. But one of them is that shift from assessing performance by presence, meaning kind of butts in the seat, to assessing performance by product and productivity and what are you actually doing. And that is, we talked about the Uber micromanager earlier. That's a really hard thing for a lot of us older school managers to wrap their heads around. That, just because, Jane is not in her seat, it doesn't mean that Jane's not outperforming everybody else in the organization. She's just doing it on her own time and in her own way. The other interesting thing, especially as we get into performance evaluation season and bonus season, is the sense of fairness. And we're starting to see clients and companies assess and try and figure out, how are we going to evaluate our employees? Are we going to overweight because they were in the office? And so just because somebody was, coming into the office every day, he or she gets a bigger bonus or a better, performance evaluation versus the person that's at home, which I think, you talk about fairness, you talk about creating a sense of belonging. Personally, I think it's just wrong. I think that's going in the wrong direction. But trying to figure out, okay, we set these, especially performance evaluations, we set these goals back in December, January, earlier in the year, and life changed. And most organizations, I'm guessing, did not go back and reevaluate and reassess their metrics. So how do we kind of do that on the fly? And again, how do you reward? If somebody's answering their emails, work-life balance notwithstanding, but it's doing their work, answering their emails at 11 p.m. at night, again, you're not necessarily seeing that, but you need to be conscious about how do you reward without maybe encouraging, those sorts of activities. So Christy, I have no idea if I answered your question, but some things that our clients are kind of keeping top of mind.
Absolutely.
And
And go ahead, Jay.
What Mike said. One of the things that we work with our clients on right now is this is a different environment, so act differently. And one of the things I tell my team is, you know what? If you got things to do, go do them during the day. If somebody's going to cover you, why wait till 6 o'clock to head to the grocery store? If you can do it 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as long as you're covering things or you keep up on things. So create a more flexible schedule for them. And, in the summertime, hey, you want to go out and cut the grass in the middle of the afternoon, save your weekend, as long as you're covered, you get your work done. So, it's not like, well, we're just going to have the office now at home. You have to have, it's just a different environment. So, and I have found that when the leaders that can do that to their people say, you know what you need to do. You're an adult. I'll give you feedback, but let's look at this differently and in a fun way. So there's benefits to it. They're being much more successful.
Yeah, and I would just say, I just want to build on that a bit because I think it's very interesting how different a perspective can be from a leader perspective. So Jay, I could tell you, I am amazing at giving feedback. And I'm looking at the comment from Jen, thank you. I need to be coaching. And I am very directive. I've always been that way, but boy, is it amplified now. And when you get to the point where I'm receiving that information, I feel unappreciated. I feel micromanaged. I feel like maybe this is not the company for me. And this is where companies start to lose their superstars. We see it anyway, but especially now, I think that there may be a huge challenge that companies aren't expecting, that people have started to emotionally disconnect when they were totally connected, and they were on your succession list, you're prepared for them, and there have been some surprises. And by the time people come to you to resign, they've already disconnected. So you can try to get them to stay, but it's going to take a lot of extra effort to get them reconnected. So being able to think about how that impact is, finding ways of being able to survey and hear from your employees now is critical. Right. So what questions might you have? We've asked you to put that into the chat. And I actually see a question from Tony. So I'm going to ask that to the entire panel and see who wants to answer it. So Tony, here I go. How are leaders developing necessary remote policies and procedures for legal and security concerns? And how are they offering training on how to best work in the remote environment? Anyone want to share?
I can talk, I mean, to the kind of second half of that, the training and, best, how to work best in a remote environment. Some of the interviews we were doing during our research, companies were actively providing coaching to their management on how to lead with empathy and how to continue engaging your remote workforce. So they were understanding that this is going to be a challenge for a lot of their managers, and we're actively providing those coaching tips and that one-on-one interaction with their management.
Christy, some of what I've seen is now's a really, really good time to review every policy, practice, process that you have. One is because some of the things that we did 20 years ago are irrelevant right now. And this is forcing organizations to take a look at the process. I think the other opportunity that is there that sometimes is broken and disjointed is because you need other leaders from other teams to help you in this process. And that's not working as well because everybody is either so busy or just do what you want to, or send me the process and let me evaluate it. But the reality is that now's a good time for leaders to use the tools that they have and they've learned and put them into practice right now. So it's coaching your peers, influencing your peers, but also looking at it from the standpoint is that now's a great time to be influential.
Absolutely. Thank you. We have another question from Sean. Thank you, Sean. Our organization has added a number of fully or mostly remote people who aren't near the head office, including Sean. How do you think these blended organizations will work long term? Why don't we start with Jay? What do you think, Jay?
I believe that blended organizations are here to stay. I think there is a little bit of the pendulum swings. It was like all office, now all remote. But I think it's going to come back and it's going to hedge more on, remote work. For example, my daughter, she's been wanting to work from home for years, and her boss was in favor of it. His boss was like, no, you have to be in at 8 o'clock. You have to leave at 5:15. Well, COVID forced that. But they did see productivity go up. So the boss said, well, you know what? We're going to have one office day a week. On Wednesdays, everybody's going to come in. That's when we can schedule our meetings, have some brainstorming sessions, do some things like that. I think that's where it's headed. I think that's where it's going to be headed because they're just seeing that. And, it's a time saver because the reality of it is you got to get up, get ready, drive a half an hour into work. Those are non-productive times. And, so I think it's here to stay. And I think it's going to morph more towards we're going to get together in the office once a week or every couple of weeks. I think that's here to stay. And actually one of our clients, they pay $1 million a month for their office space. And they're getting rid of their office space. They're doing completely that. And he's like, let's put a lot of money in the bottom line. We can do more benefits for our employees. And we're going to downsize it so we can still have meetings, but not have to pay that $1 million a month. And that's huge.
Absolutely.
I
Sure.
want to mention the benefit. I have an HR and talent acquisition background, and when I think about the market that has opened up for organizations in regard to finding talent now, it's mind blowing. Sandy's like, yes. I mean, and I'm seeing organizations really embrace that and say, you know what? We're remote anyways. My geographic location just opened up for where I'm looking for talent, and that's where it really is where it should go. So I think it's also here to stay, and I love it. I love working from home. I run my company from home, but before that, I worked several days from home, and I'm a proponent of that. So I love to see this shift. I think it's one of the true positives that has come out of this situation.
I love it and totally agree with it. And also look at it from the standpoint, I'm telling people you can work for any company in the world right now. So talent, I mean, there's a competition on talent. If I wanted to work in London, I can work for a company in London sitting right here in Clinton Township, Michigan. So the reality is that when we're looking at retaining talent and really of opportunities for our team members, if they don't like what they're doing, if leaders aren't engaged, guess what they're going to do? They're going to go somewhere else and find the ideal job that they really want.
One of the things I wanted to throw in on that, our client that's giving up their $1 million a month office space, they're taking some of that money and to help employees set up home offices. Because employees that have designated workplaces at home are more productive than if I'm at the kitchen table or the dining room table, or I'm trying to do it in the living room with the kids running around, and saying, how can we help you create a functional workspace in your living area? And I just thought that was phenomenal. You know, they're using some of that extra money to upgrade computers, get people headphones, get them some office equipment. A lot of clients are saying, hey, you know, we're going to send you your favorite office chair since we're not going to need it anymore. So I think some of those benefits really help in making this transition more permanent and easier on the employees.
Mhm. Now,
I want
Mike,
to turn Jay's question back to him for Sean's question, sorry, back to him for just a second. First question, Sean, did you bring enough breakfast to share for the rest of us? And
Sadly, no.
second, knowing you're in a creative industry, you know, how do you find that that interaction, you know, when you've got all of your creatives kind of scattered across the state?
Well, I'd say, you know, we were a little rocky at first because we're used to that in-person collaboration, but our team, you know, because we're a digital firm, I run a marketing services firm that's actually based in Lansing. And what we've found is that, you know, a lot of us, like, for example, for me, one of the largest clients I've dealt with for 15 years is all virtual and has been. So I'm used to working that way. Our team definitely had some adjustment at first, but pretty quickly, I think we hit our stride. The biggest thing we found is, and I really agree with Cheryl's comment, I'm now able to draw on a broader base of talent than just people who are in the Metro Lansing area. You know, I've added some people that we would not have gotten if it was, hey, you've got to be in the Lansing office. You know, I mean, for example, me, I'm not commuting 3.5 hours.
okay. I wanted to turn to Mike's question. Mike, thank you. And share it. One of the challenges we are facing in our work office, the highest paid employees have the opportunity to work from home. So doctors, for example, are able to do telemedicine. However, our lowest paid employees, medical assistants, for example, have to be in the clinic. This has created a have and have nots in the office and hard to manage teams that have to work together. What suggestions do you have?
Christy, and thank you for sharing that, Mike. It's not a direct answer to your question, but it's also an observation to this. When we went and moved to the work from home, many organizations just assumed that their employees could pick up and start working without realizing many of them didn't have internet at home because they have it on their phone and they work in an office with an internet. And so the expansion of our minds of not assuming removing some of the biases that we have of expectations of how other people live. We have to be aware that, again, as you mentioned, our service industry is not able to really pick up and do work from home. They are out serving, they're seeing clients, they have to do face-to-face. Restaurant industries, they can't work from home. So what is it? I don't know what the answer is, but we have to do something different because everything is not going to move to a remote environment. But we also have to look at equity in pay because that is what's important as well for those that are doing the service work.
Yeah, Mike and I interviewed a number of people for our second report around blended workforces. And one of the interesting things, and I think you might find this as a parallel, Mike, is in healthcare. A lot of the leadership had the opportunity to work from home, yet it was demotivating if the frontline workers did not see their leaders. So while it was possible, the decision in many organizations has been, if you are a director and you can do your work from home, you will go into the hospitals, you will be going into the clinics, people need to see your face, and also providing an opportunity for people to be able to be recognized, maybe not just by compensation, but um, recognition was really important. We see you here, we know the sacrifice you're making. And it's actually, I think, a little bit of a challenge now because I think earlier in the year, especially for people who are on the front lines in healthcare, there was a lot of celebration and there's a feeling that perhaps that's dying down a bit. But, just the recognition of, we appreciate you being here, thank you. And thinking through, is there a possibility of some of the work that can be done at home? So is there a way of flexing it all? And if so, is that something that you desire? Because some want it, some would rather not do anything in their homes. And I think that that's been part of the challenge for many people too. Just, I don't have a choice and I really don't want people seeing into my personal space. I don't feel like I can cut it off. And that makes it really hard. So I'm going to bring something up now, and we have an option. We were going to break out into small groups, but I think there is a wealth of information right here. So if you're okay with it, I'd like to keep us all together and then turn to the sharing of knowledge of everyone that is in the room, because once again, we have people who have experience, but guess what? Each of you are here bringing a different perspective, and we would love to hear from you. So at this point, the panelists become part of the larger group along with me, and we are turning to you. We want to hear really, what are the things that you are really doing well? We want to hear about that. And then we want to hear about your biggest challenges. So who wants to share?
I'll go first. So this is Nikki Pardo. And so this is really interesting that you're asking this question, Christy, and it's right on time because the other day I was thinking about, so of course, like the rest of the country, we went into quarantine mid-March. And like Sandy said, that now we're able to work across the country, across the world. And I'll tell you that this is the first time that I've actually, like, it's weird. I've become friends with two of my points of contact for my clients, where that would have never happened before, because I'm kind of working with my client and, then we kind of keep it business. But because, like someone referenced a minute ago, we're working from our own personal space, our homes, then it's a different level of intimacy. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I do love the fact, like Sandy was spot on, that now we've actually broadened our scope a little bit more. And I still have clients when I work with leadership teams, believe it or not, that fly me out. And I'm like, oh God, one was a hospital, but for the most part, like I said, it's something different about this, that there's more of an intimate connection. We talk about our kids getting on our nerves, and we talk about our husbands, and we talk about, what we're making for dinner. I mean, yeah, so I love it.
Thank you, Nikki. Rich, did you want to share? And hello, Rich.
Hey,
So good to
Christy.
see you.
Hey, guys. I know quite a few of you guys on the call. I think, what we've done really well is we were actually very well prepared to go remote very quickly. Our company was up and running within 24 hours of the stay-at-home order. One of the things that I'm really challenged with is those folks that were fully engaged when in the office are somehow have figured out how to be engaged in a video call. But those that would come to a meeting, listen, not really participate, and then those are the folks that walk out of the meeting when they were here and whisper something to you like, hey, I have an idea. We've lost that because once a Zoom call ends, that conversation ends. So we've lost some innovation and some productivity from that, kind of the shutting off of the Zoom call. And those folks are actually very quiet on the Zoom calls. And, one of the things I always wonder, especially when like having a call with a client is they send out these invites. I always start with the video on, not knowing if the person joining the call is going to be putting their video on at all. And it's unfortunate in our business, most of the clients come with the video off. And it's kind of, how do you say, hey, we'll have a better interaction? Would you mind turning your video on? I don't think we're comfortable as a society saying that yet.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it just to Jay for a second. I want everyone to share, but I think this is something that Jay can really add a lot of insight into because we've talked about this. There are people who process out loud, and then there are people who are processing in their brain.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear from you, Jay. What can we do in this type of environment to make sure that those who are processing and may have a solution and moving forward with it, but just didn't get around to sharing it with everyone else, what can we do?
Well, if you have an internal processor, the number one key is to give an agenda of what's going to be discussed so they can think about it and come better prepared. Rich, those might be a lot of the people that don't say anything at the meetings because they have to internalize it and kick it around. And then you want to do a follow-up afterwards, if there's new conditions arise, do a follow-up and make it shorter. Hey, we're gonna have this meeting, we're gonna discuss some objectives, we're gonna discuss some things. I want everybody to kick it around. Then we're gonna follow up with a quick 15-minute. And I want everybody to give 2 or 3 ideas and thoughts that they have. When you do it prepared like that for the internal thinker, they're much happier. They're going to come better prepared. External thinkers, we can just shoot it out there at a drop of a dime, right, Christy? Anything changes. So, that's the key. That's one of the big keys. And because oftentimes with internal thinkers also, you have to kind of pull the answer out of them. They'll listen in the meeting, they'll come up with some ideas. You'll be talking to them a week later and say, well, why didn't you contribute anything? Well, I really didn't know if anybody liked my idea. So you have to be real proactive that way and say, we want everybody to come prepared, give us some feedback, 1 or 2 ideas after the meeting. And that helps really engage collaboration and ideation.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Sean is going to leave, but he just gave us a really good piece. Thank you so much, Sean. He's just saying shorter meetings are better for remote.
Yeah, we're finding, just as a parting thought, we're finding very commonly meetings that would have been an hour, we're getting them done in a half an hour, and they're all we need to cover.
I love that. Sean, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to have to drop on everybody.
We appreciate you. Thank you. I'm going to flip something on Jay, and this is some feedback I got earlier in my career that I've had to really work on. When you're leading, when you're a processor, when you speak, and you are also leading a team, sometimes people will think what you say is the decision. So I think, especially from a leadership standpoint, part of coaching is you may need to shut your mouth. You may need to say, I am thinking out loud. These are ideas. These are not directives, because people can sense, I think, more when they know you, or in an environment where they can kind of see your body language. But if you're just on a Zoom, they may think, well, Christy made up her mind. Why should I share anything? And the person who processes out loud is just processing and waiting for banter and some other ideas to come in. Anyone experiencing that as a leader?
If you're an external thinker, one of my clients lined up as he tells his team, I'm going to go on a rant. And the key thing at the end of the rant, though, because external thinkers, we'll talk about turning left, turning right, going straight, going up, going down. At the key at the end of it is to say, hey, thanks for letting me collect my thoughts verbally. This is what I've decided I think we should do. It's that summation at the end is critical. And that really helps because then, especially the internal thinkers, they go, okay, they talked about all these different things. At least I know what I'm going to process. And the whole team knows the direction you want to go in. I want to add one comment, though, to Rich's comment earlier about getting people to turn their cameras on. I make fun of it. I make a game of it. As the panel knows, when we had our prep call, we have a parrot, and I had him on my hand. They're like, what's that? And I find that when you turn your camera on, make it a little more fun. Sometimes I've worn a baseball cap on them, say, hey, look, I'm not all dressed up. Don't worry about it. If you make people feel comfortable, they're more willing to turn the camera on. And we've actually done on some calls pet shows, so here's this, here's that. And I think if you just make people feel comfortable about it, because I'll joke around, so don't worry, I got a nice shirt on, but I got sweatpants on underneath it, stuff like that. And I think it takes sometimes people a little bit of time to get used to that. But if you lead the way, they're more willing to turn the camera on.
Mike, we'd love to hear from you. You have a lot, you've added a lot. Can we hear a little bit about what you're doing to be successful? Yes, you, Mike Flores.
Me, Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. There's a Mike Durgis too, but and here's the problem. I'm looking right at you, but you don't know it. So I'm like staring at you. I'm like, Mike, it's you. And so this is one of the things that we run into. I'm like, of course he knows I'm looking at him. Who else would I be looking at? Okay, so thank you, Mike. You've had a lot of ideas. I want to hear what's making you successful.
So for us, I think like many organizations, when we had to pivot back in March, we didn't expect to be 8 months, 9 months into this and still be operating kind of a similar environment. So when we pivoted, we actually pivoted very quickly for the size of our organization. We're a small nonprofit in Corktown specializing in healthcare. And we thought that was only going to be 60, 90 days. So we were able to pivot all of our providers to telehealth. And like I mentioned, our medical assistants really didn't have to do anything because we said we were just going to push out those appointments, right? But it came to a point where we said, well, for us to meet our objectives, we have to start doing stuff on site. And what that created, it created a dichotomy in our workforce for those who could work from home and those who had to work from the office. And in medicine, it's very authoritative. There is a power differential. And when doctors say something, there is no question. You have to do what the doctor says, right? So you try to create an environment that allows for people to work together, even in kind of this very authoritative environment. And what this working from home or offsite has created is truly said, we're truly are not equals. Because what the doctor says has to be, you have to execute what the doctor says. And we've lost that opportunity or environment for us to say, even though we work in a very authoritative structure, we still try to be colleagues. We still try to create a very posture and environment where everyone's working collaboratively. And we've really, really struggled with that. We've done some of these Zoom lunches where we'll order lunches for everyone, have them delivered to people's homes, have them here in the office, and we'll do like a Zoom lunch. And those were really fun at the very beginning. But then I think people just get fatigued with a lot of this. And so I guess that's where we're struggling. We felt that we were very strong when we had to pivot very quickly. We were able to continue with our services. And now we're struggling where, yes, we're still continuing with our services, but we've created a dichotomy in our workforce. And how do you manage that? Because truly in medical care, everyone has to work collaboratively, but it's very authoritative.
It's interesting, and
that's what we currently find ourselves.
I heard from a couple people that they've been doing very small celebrations of milestones. So maybe there's some shared goals that everyone has that you can say, okay, when we get to this point, we're going to celebrate and build it around shared goals. which is, I think, a little different than let's just get together and have a toast or let's have lunch together. It's celebrating progress towards goals. So I know that some people have done that successfully. It may or may not work for you, Mike, but I just wanted to throw it out there because it is something that people are doing. They're pivoting from specifically into, we needed to accomplish this to be able to have a great 2020, or we need to do this. And when we get this done, it's preparing us for a great 2021. Let's see how that goes.
Yep. No, thank you. Thank you. Something else that we struggled with as well is there were a lot of things were personal and people were able to keep behind closed doors because of the challenges that we have with working from home and some people being able to do that and not being able to do that. A lot of those things that are personal are coming to the forefront. And for us, the thing that comes to the forefront is childcare, especially for medical assistants. Usually on the lower end of the income spectrum, usually don't have a lot of familial support and has created a lot of challenges where they were able to manage it in the past. They aren't able to manage it as successfully, and it's entering the workforce, and it has forced us to be even more empathetic. For some of us, it comes natural, and for some of us, it does not. Now, I'll put myself out there. I'm naturally not a very empathetic person when it comes to business objectives, and it's challenging.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting how policies have to adjust because even, I remember earlier in the pandemic, people were writing about how uncomfortable and exposed they felt, that people had a glimpse into their homes and they didn't like it. The lack of childcare facilities, just a lot of, all types of challenges have come up. So being more flexible with your policies to retain people may be hard, but I think a lot of companies are facing that. I'd love to hear from Jen.
Yeah, sure.
What are you facing, Jen?
Hi. We were actually really well positioned. We had a work from home anywhere policy that we implemented a few years ago. So for the most part, it was pretty easy. However, we had really kind of segmented our workforce where our salaried employees were allowed to, but not our non-exempt employees. So, for me, that was a great opportunity because we had to let everybody do it. And it was really successful. We found that those more lower level transactional employees actually thrived in this environment. They are producing, it's a very metrics driven organization. So they're doing very well in that regard. And, giving them that flexibility has been great. So for me, that kind of brought more equality to our workplace because it was seen, how come that group gets to and we don't? So I thought that was a real win based on the current situation. For our challenges, I think it goes back to that management style. As I coach leaders, I'll get people sending me notes like, hey, they've been away for 30 minutes. Should I document it? You know what I mean? They're watching people. So getting away from that and teaching them to really focus on performance. So we have, as a company, decided to look, a little bit more rigorously at our performance standards to see how we measure people. I've definitely been an advocate. Just because they're coming in the office does not mean they were producing. I mean, we have people that sat around and didn't do anything, played on their phones, but their butt in the seat did not mean that they were a more productive employee. So I think we have to change our leadership styles and challenge that. I think the other piece that we're challenged with right now is kind of the mental health burnout piece. I think people have found that there are no boundaries working from home. We're under a lot of pressure and people are really working a lot. So as a company, we're sending the message, take your time off, make sure you're taking walks at lunches and everything like that. But realistically, sometimes the workload doesn't make that possible. So I'm really coaching in my space. Leaders need to lead by example. Take your time off, make sure that you're disconnecting and letting your people know that it is safe to do that. Make sure that they have backups in place because especially as we come through the holidays, we've got a lot of people that haven't even taken time off all year and it's not healthy. And we'll see that in the mental health space as well. So those are some of the challenges we're focusing on.
Absolutely. And Sandy added in the chat that we should, if your company has an EAP, you need to make sure that you're promoting that.
Yes, we have really been using that and they've even come in and done presentations. We had a really good one yesterday where we use Uliance. They're amazing. They came in and spoke to our workforce and, about empathetic management style and how, we are focused on business results and that's great, but people are bringing their authentic whole self to work. And that does come with baggage sometimes. We've talked about childcare situations and being flexible. So again, a lot of coaching on the leadership with making sure that, you know, people do have the flexibility to get their work done. People are shifting their schedules around or taking breaks during the day. But again, if we're performing and we're showing those results, that's where we need to be focused, not, you know, who's away from their desk for 20 minutes and, you know, monitoring, micromanaging in that sense. So yeah, the EAP has been a really good tool. And I know that the use is definitely up this year. I'm sure everybody can attest to that. But sometimes those personal problems, you don't want to get in the middle of that as a leader. You know, there's a time to hand that off and a resource for that. So it's been a really, really useful tool this year.
Thank you, Jen. Tony, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are you dealing with?
Well, so my company is Internet 2. We're a consortium that works with like all the universities in the country. And so I've been thinking about a lot of things, and what's been working well for us is, you know, the jig is up, meaning, hey, if you can do it remotely, you should be able to do it remotely. That's number one. And people are finding out that they can do that. It isn't just sitting around and having, you know, lunches and coffees. It seemed like it was happening a little bit too much. And now it's really about, are we getting what we need to get done for our members? I was one of those people that wherever I am, butt in the seat, on a plane, at home, in Starbucks, metrically, I'm getting it done. What's not working, and there's a lot going on. So one, how do I put this bluntly? People who were riding and not getting stuff done might have had a lot of support, and now that they're being measured with getting stuff done because they're not together, is causing a little bit of a political rift. Okay. I don't know who talked about the haves and have-nots. Those who wanted to be remote because the other people who might be above them but aren't doing as much as they're doing, they could do their job remote. And if they wanted to be remote in the past, they were told, no, you need to be in the seat. And now they're finding out, wow, that person really can do it remote. Now what do we do? Because we want them to come back. And so there's some general bigger issues too. I like what Jay is talking about. I like to pick his brain, even though that's what he does for a living, it sounds like. The biggest challenges I'm seeing is there's a difference between remote work and remote culture or remote society. Are we going to become a remote culture? I think that's really dangerous. And so people are the ambiguity of, okay, I can deal with remote work and I can deal with a blended remote. I can deal with a totally 100% remote office. But if I can't see somebody, sense their breathing. I mean, I read an article from UCLA in 2011 about why is everybody so anxious? Well, I'm looking at you right now, Christy. I've never met you. My caveman brain right now is going, why do I sense any breath? I see her. She's very pretty, but there's no humanity going on. There's no biology going on. And we all think, oh, this is great. I could just turn on the camera, but we're not in the same room, you know? And I'm not saying you have to do that 100%, but this idea that it's going to be 100% remote and just turning on the camera will solve everything, biologically, we're not that evolved yet. So there is this great anxiety that people can't put their finger on. It's great that the meetings are short. It's great that we're getting things efficient, but we're still human beings in the end. And we got to figure out how we're going to work that way. And it's the unspoken anxiety that I'm sensing, at least. So what I do is I do my work and I make sure I go out and I see somebody outside while I'm walking, get some breath, you know, even if they run 60 miles away from me because they're afraid of something. And I'm just like, you know, it's only 6 feet. You don't have to go that far. You know, just some kind of human camaraderie needs to happen for a balanced life, let alone a remote environment. And I think Jay did a great job of saying, hey, this is what we do. This is how we work remotely. And people know it, they come in. And then you will have human interactions with us occasionally, you know, it may be a meeting or you'll be meeting clients. And I think people are okay with that. the ambiguity and the uncertainty of will it ever come back to this is really hurting not only businesses to plan, because they're like, are we going to be able to go back to our office and keep our office? Or do we just have to say, that's it, no more, get rid of the rent, and are people going to be like, am I ever going to see somebody again ever? Because there's no end game when this is, when we're supposed to end. There's always this, well, 2 more weeks. Oh, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. That's creating so much anxiety that the remote working isn't the problem. It's the human anxiety is the problem, compounded with, I don't know what I'm doing, this part of my job, how do I do this remotely? And those can be fixed, but the grander issues of people being anxious, we just got to live through it. We have happy hours on Friday, so people, pretend that they're at a bar, or we play games. We were supposed to all get together as a company because we didn't know each other very well because we were so distributed. And then we were all going to meet in Detroit. And we're all going to shake hands, say hi. Oh, you're the person that has this face that I talk to in this department. And you live in Texas. I live in Michigan. We couldn't do it. So we did a virtual meeting this year, 3 meetings, we played games, all that, but it still was like, I got to know the person a little bit better, but subconsciously, I don't know that person. My caveman brain is going, what's going on? This is weird, And so I think we just have to recognize that and push through. And then hopefully when we get to that decision, do we go fully remote or we go blended? It's okay to make either decision, just as long as we are back to some semblance of normal with some caveats of newness, I guess is the best way to put it. So I know that was a pretty long
riffing off of Tony's for a second. Thoughts on, was just, I don't know, reading an article on how phone usage has actually increased. And even millennials are learning how to pick up the phone and talk on the phone. And that you can make sometimes a better emotional connection over the phone without all of the Zoom camera, and that sometimes is better than a Zoom call if you're in a one-on-one meeting. Just kind of curious, and so what sort of role does the phone play in addition to as another tool in your tool belt for this managing a blended workforce?
Hey, Mike, you know what? I have a point about that. That's such an interesting thing that you brought up. Prior to the pandemic, I was doing the majority of my leadership coaching on the phone. So I coach people all over the country. And even if they lived locally, I did my coaching on the phone. And some people would be like, how can you do that? Don't you need to see them? And what I found was I actually listened at a much deeper level on the phone because I'm listening to the tone of their voice or how they're breathing. I'm really just focused and honed in on that. Of course, you pick up visual cues when you can see them on screen, but I think the listening was much deeper. Now that people are so familiar with Zoom, I'm doing most of my coaching on Zoom because they're comfortable with it. But I do think that I, as a coach, listened deeper when I also didn't have to see myself on the screen, which is highly distracting. So I think that's a great point that you made. And Tony, I wanted to say this. One of the notes that I took as we were talking was eliminate uncertainty. And I underlined that. And I think it speaks to your point. When I see organizations like Google and other organizations saying, hey, listen, we're going to do this until the end of Q1. We've decided, or we're going to do this until June. Everybody just know that's what we're going to do. Some smaller organizations might be thinking like, why are you calling that so early? We could maybe go back in March, or, why are you doing that? But I think it eliminates some uncertainty. So look for ways where you can do that, where you can just call it and say, that's what it's going to be for us. Until then, we've made the decision. Any kind of small ways like that you can eliminate uncertainty reduces employee stress.
And I agree with you, Cheryl, that does work. But the problem is that we make that decision, in March and say, okay, just by May, do this. And then there's ambiguity. It's like, okay, by September, just do this. And then you add those up. Yeah. And you would like to think that people would say, okay, I'm just going to focus till September. I'm just going to focus till December. But you do that over and over and over. People start going, when is it going to end? And you need to start to think about that answer, how to help when those get compounded over time. So yeah, I mean, just business wise, you have to make a decision so that you can move forward and focus. And that's what I do. But I'm not like losing sleep over this all the time. It's just something I'm thinking about, and I sense from others, and I try to give them, help, to say, hey, just focus for the next month and all that. But yeah, it is out there, and it's just something that I think leaders need to know, which helps with the compassion, number one. But number two, you got to balance, okay, I'm being compassionate, but by being compassionate, I'm giving you, like a puppy, I'm giving you boundaries so that you're comfortable with doing your work. I don't want to call people puppies, but there's when there is a crisis, it is good to hear a good, solid, trusted voice to give you a goal, and certainty. And by doing that with the, hey, let's just do this for now and then move on, but I think this year is just so different and so ambiguous at different points that it is starting to affect people a little bit. So it's the remote work versus the remote culture. That's always in everybody's back of their head. So how do you deal with that and not it become a problem during the business day to get things done?
And one approach to that is that we're all in a pandemic. So, what I'm finding is that team members are extending grace because they know their leaders have no idea when they can really go back to the office. But it also as a leader, gives us the opportunity to really be authentic and transparent of saying, this is the best case scenario, but I don't know, and it depends. And especially if you have team members across the country, you can't, it's hard to say this is what we're going to do because every region is experiencing something different. And so I have been very clear. I mean, I have a business that has been remote even pre-pandemic. And now, I mean, I have clients that say, hey, you want to come have lunch? And I'm like, no. I'll have lunch on Zoom with you, but I'm not coming to your office. But it's really sharing with people that I don't know. And the ambiguity is something that we have tried to remove from workplaces, but it's always really been there. We've just not paid attention to it or try to move it out of the way.
That's true. Thank you. I see somebody else wants to ask a question. I don't want to, because of time, I just want to make sure she gets, Nikki has.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So I had a scenario, and because when I do my trainings, I make it mandatory because they're interactive that everyone's camera is on. So there was this one particular training, and this young lady would absolutely not turn her camera on. And I even, made a couple of references. I didn't call her out directly, but I'm like, hey, especially when you get into your breakout sessions, I want you to be present and blah, blah, blah. So after the training, one of the staff, because it was like a mix of not her actual senior leadership, but there were some, it's a tech company. So, people had elaborate bookshelves and all of this. So this young lady was, I forgot what her position was, something like admin support or something like that. And she was embarrassed of where she lived. So when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, my own privilege, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even think about that. Because I noticed when she did turn her camera on for a second, she was against this white wall. And it almost looked like a white wall, like a bathroom door kind of thing. So again, I tapped into my own, like, gosh, how did I miss this? Here I am trying to make it mandatory and just thinking about my own agenda. And I didn't even think about, that people who might be embarrassed of their home. So like, what approaches, and has that ever happened to any of you before? And what was your mindset, or how did you navigate through it? So this is to the group, really.
Yeah, he wants to share.
Well, if somebody is in a place where they don't think it's professional enough, we teach them how to use the backgrounds, for Zoom and other places to just give you a basic background, that, looks pleasing and is professional, not too busy. And so it will mask, where you are. So that,
Right,
so
but by the time they reach me, by the time we're doing the training, right?
I'm just saying is that so that's part
Yeah.
of my question before was like when you make policies and procedures for remote and you train people how to
Right.
best work remotely, that's part of the training is to say, hey, if you're in a place where you're not really comfortable, this is how you turn on your background so you can do your video call and be present.
Hey, Nikki, I have a suggestion. Why don't you use one of those backgrounds and call it out at the beginning of the training? Like, look at my beautiful background back here. This is actually not my home. I'm using a background. And then if there's anyone on the call,
Yeah,
they might be like,
but what I'm saying
oh.
is by the time it gets there, I'm already kicking off the training, so that would have to be done preliminarily because they'd have to choose a background and then they might not be technologically savvy. And, like I said, by the time they reach me, we're hitting the ground running, so I don't know if I would have time to take out and say, or I might not even know that a person is embarrassed. Or I guess my question is, when you do, I don't know if anyone does trainings or if it's more one-on-one coachings, but when you do you make it mandatory? And if your trainings are interactive, do you make it mandatory that that their cameras are on? I think that's my question.
Nikki, I make the request up front when I'm doing any type of sessions, and I've done them for all sizes. I make the request that they show their background, and that we can see their face for engagement. But then I also allow people the opportunity. I think what you're talking about is what I've experienced before as well, is that it really is a leadership connection that's even before you get there.
Right.
Is, do I know enough about my team member to say, hey, let me get them a green screen, or let me get something for my team member so they will feel comfortable having a meeting and be really engaged. So they'll have the opportunity, because if we don't take that extra step with those team members, then it will be, I'm not going to show my screen, I'm going to be disconnected, I'm embarrassed. And then the privileged part of us assumes, well, they just don't want to be connected. And that's really not the case.
Right. You're spot on, Sandy. Spot on. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. So it happens for you.
I was going to say, one thing you could do is create a generic background screen and send it out to the participants ahead of time saying, hey, here's a background screen. I'm going to be using it. If you want to use the same, the same screen, here's how to do that. So that then, they've got something in front of them. They don't have to worry about creating something. It's nice, it's professional, it's, it's going to show them well, so to speak. And allow them to remove that insecurity.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Mike. Now, I was just going to share, Nikki, for birthday Zooms or whatever, people have sent out backgrounds to me and said, put these up before you get on the Zoom. So perhaps that might be something that you could share as pre-work to say, I'm sending out this as a part of the workshop. I want everyone to pick from these 3 and upload one. I think there's gentle ways of being able to help with that, to be more, just to make the environment a little more inclusive without knowing a lot about the people who may be participating. So we are at 9:57. And we could probably go another hour or two. And there was one other thing that I was hoping we could talk about. I don't think we have time now, but that doesn't mean we can't get back together. And it was the piece that Mike brought up, Mike Flores, because I'm staring right at him. He doesn't know I'm looking at him, but my eyes are straight on him as a facilitator. I have to work through this. And he talked about really thinking about what your customers want. And I think as we have been moving through the pandemic, and as Mike and I have talked to people, and I'm sure you have too, we've been focused internally. We have really focused internally on our employees, on our ability to manage, but we can't lose sight of who our customers have been, are now, or could be. So I want to just thank Mike for bringing that up. I'm staring right at you, Mike. Not Mike Durgis, Mike Flores. and make sure that as we think about this going forward, that we keep that in mind. I just want to say thank you to each of you. We have your emails, and what we are hoping to do is be able to send you out some summaries. So Jay has generously put together some tips that you can use, and Mike and I have an engagement survey. We may have some other things from our other panelists, but we will be sending you a follow-up following this with some tools. The other thing that we have an opportunity to do, if you weren't able to capture all of the wonderful things in our chat, I want to make sure that you have access to that too. So I can't wait to read the study from UCLA that Tony put in there. There were a couple other links that were added earlier. So we're going to make sure that you have the opportunity to have access to that too. I just want to say thank you to each of you for fully participating. I want to make sure that if there's anything that we missed, you have an opportunity to chime in before we close. So it's 10 now, so if we can just have 2 more minutes of grace to be able to see if there's anything that people are really wanting to share, and we don't want to close without giving them that opportunity. Erica, did you want to share something? I could see you like leaning forward many times.
There were many times that I wanted to say something, but no, I really don't want to take up anybody else's time. I think, honestly, Nikki, Tony, Sandy were hitting the points that I was going to chime in on about being able to have these authentic times and intimate times right now due to the pandemic. And one key point that I wanted to bring up was, even prior to the pandemic, we had a lack of human connection, that connection of just on a human level, let's just connect, not your job title, not your status. We had an issue with that before. Then you add in the pandemic and remote working, and now we're at a point where it's more of a challenge. So still having to filter through that in a remote environment, or even a blended environment, makes things more challenging right now. So that's all.
Thank you, Erica. I could tell, that's one of the things I can tell from facilitator. When people lean close to the camera, they're ready to speak. I just want to say one more thank you, and that is to Emily. So Emily has been behind the scenes, very quiet, not saying much, but let me just tell you, she is technical expertise working. So I want to say thank you, Emily, for making everything nice and smooth and wonderful for our panel. We appreciate you, and we will continue to appreciate you as we have more of these in the future. So thank you. We really are so thankful to have you here. And with that, we're going to close, but this is not the end. We will have other opportunities to get together, and watch for a follow-up email. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Good
you all.
morning.
Bye. Have a great day.